Shall we pray? Almighty God, who in your wisdom and goodness has appointed the office of rulers and parliaments for the welfare of society and the just government of men and women, we beseech you to behold with your abundant favor us, your servants, whom you have called to the performance of important trust in these islands. Father, let your blessing descend upon us here assembled, and grant that we may treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to promote your honor and glory, and to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of these islands and of those whose interest you have committed to our charge. And this we beg in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. May the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all evermore. Amen. Be seated. Item number 2, the minutes of the 20th, 22nd, and the 25th of March, 2019. Senator Jardine.
Madam President, I move that the minutes of the meetings of Wednesday the 20th of March and Friday the 22nd of March, 2019 be taken as read, and that consideration of the minutes of the meeting of Monday the 25th of March, 2019 be deferred.
Is there an objection to that motion? No objection.
Madam President, I move that the minutes of Wednesday the 20th of March and Friday the 22nd of March, 2019 be confirmed as correct records of those meetings.
Is there any objection to that motion? No objection. The minutes of the 20th and the 22nd of March are confirmed. Thank you, Senator Jardine. Item number 3, messages.
No messages, Madam President.
Thank you. Item number 4, reports of committees. There are none. Item number 5, announcements. Senators, I would like to remind you that the Parliamentary Strengthening Seminar on May the 1st and the 2nd, for which you have received an invitation from the Speaker of the House, it's a reminder, and would you please RSVP to Mrs. Place. Thank you. Item number 6, notices of motion. There are none. Item number 7, petitions. There are none. Item number 8, statements. There are none. Item number 9, introduction of bills. There are none. Item number 10, the first reading of public bills. There are none. Item number 11, the first reading of private bills. There are none. Item number 12, question and question period. There is none. There are none. And item number 13, the orders of the day. The first order of the day is the second reading of the Liquor Licensing Amendment Act 2019. And that's Senator Kathy Lynn Simmons, AG, and Government Leader. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I'm pleased to share with the Senate today the Liquor License Amendment Bill 2019 to usher in needed reform to our liquor licensing regime. The salient features of this bill are 1, to reconstitute the Liquor Licensing Authority, 2, create a new type of permit for restaurants offering catering services, 3, create new classes of license in relation to itinerant restaurants and special events, 4, to make provision for ministerial guidance to be issued, 5, provide for inspectors to be appointed to ensure enforcement of the Liquor License Act 1974, and finally to provide long overdue updated permit and license fees and fines for license applications and violations. Madam President, at present, appointment to the liquor license authorities, except the chairman, are made by the governor on the advice of the minister responsible for liquor licensing. The governor was forwarded a copy of the bill for comment, and in a letter dated 4th March 2019, he advised regarding the change of appointment, and I quote, Madam President, at present, appointments to the authority are made by myself as governor on the advice of the minister. The proposed change to appointment by the minister is therefore not of itself substantive, so there's no objection to the amendment. Madam President, the senior magistrate, as chair of the liquor licensing authorities, was consulted during the drafting of the bill and provided suggested changes that were included in the amendments to enhance the bill. Further, there has been considerable feedback provided by those in industry. All these recommendations were particularly instructive and carefully considered. Madam President, expanding the scope of the liquor licensing regime is necessary to cover instances where there are gaps in persons being eligible to obtain a liquor license. Those familiar with the Principal Act will know about the al fresco dining permits provided in Section 21A of the Act. This permit allows for a restaurant license holder to obtain a permit to sell alcohol in an open-air area adjoining the licensed premise, as designated in a sketch plan submitted with the application for the al fresco dining permit. The Act presently does not afford the opportunity to sell or supply alcohol at a catered event at an off-site venue. Accordingly, Madam President, the amendment provided in Clause 10 of the bill gives the holder of a restaurant license the ability to apply for a permit to serve alcohol and providing catering services at off-site venues. A catering permit is attached to a restaurant license granted under the Act, and there is no fee for a catering permit. Therefore, the holder of a restaurant license can apply for a permit to sell or supply alcohol at a venue not adjoined to the restaurant. To be eligible for the permit, the restaurant has to operate a catering business as part of its business. This paves the way for the restaurant to have the opportunity to enhance their business by obtaining this permit and expand their services to customers. Madam President, provision has also been made in the bill to grant two classes of license, I should say. The first is an itinerant restaurant license, which will allow the holder of a license under the Public Health Food Regulations 1950 to operate an itinerant restaurant to apply for a license to serve alcohol at a gathering or event. And Madam President, that archaic term was provided for in the definition section of the Public Health Food Regulations. And now, if you don't mind me quoting, an itinerant, restaurant includes 1, any restaurant operating for a temporary period in connection with a fair, carnival, circus, public exhibition, or similar gathering. 2, any movable stand or vehicle from which food is sold, and that's relevant for today. And 3, any kitchen in which food is prepared for any such restaurant, stand, or vehicle. Connecting the new itinerant restaurant license to the health licensing legislation ensures that not just anyone who cooks for and provides food at a gathering or event can obtain this license. Madam President, the second new class of license is a special event license. A special event license is for temporary or infrequent events that fall outside the parameters of the criteria for the classes of license presently available under the Act. This license will allow for the supply of alcohol at private or promotional events or the sale of alcohol at a public event. Examples of a special event include a sip and shop at retail stores and the increasingly popular wine tasting events. Madam President, it is important to highlight that the new classes of permit and licenses address concerns raised by the Bermuda Tourism Authority. The authority advised that, due to a lacuna in the Act, destination weddings, which were more often than not requiring catering services, were in jeopardy due to the inability to serve alcohol at the wedding. Serving alcohol at these weddings is presently unlawful, so with the expanded classes of permit and licenses, alcohol will now be able to be lawfully supplied at destination weddings and other such special events. Madam President, it is worth noting that Forms 17 to 19 inclusive under Clause 22 of the bill are quite instructive as to the requirements for a catering permit, an itinerant restaurant license, and a special event license. The form of permit and license will clearly specify the event, location, complete address, date, and times for the sale or supply of alcohol at the event. The new permit and licenses will be granted subject to the same conditions as an existing permit or license provided in Section 15 of the Act. Madam President, particular attention was given to reform the governing body that grants and renews liquor licenses in Clauses 5 and 20 of the bill. Presently, there are 3 liquor license authorities divided into separate licensing districts as provided in Section 3 of the Act. Each licensing district encompasses 3 of the 9 parishes, and persons are appointed from each parish within a district. In 1974, this model presumably ensured that the membership would be more attuned to related issues within each district, such as the suitability of proposed venues for alcohol sales. However, Madam President, today with increased mobility, the geographical criteria used to constitute the liquor licensing authority in Section 4 of the Act is no longer justifiable. Ease of transportation and communication means that there is no geographical remoteness or isolation. Further, the restrictions in the Act regarding appointments to the liquor licensing authorities have presented unnecessary impediments and are not aligned with a modernized liquor licensing regime. Accordingly, these 3 separate districts will now be removed and replaced with a single authority as provided in Clause 5 of the bill. Good morning. Madam President, Presently, the liquor licensing authorities have a combined 10 members who are appointed by the governor. The chairman of each licensing authority is the senior magistrate who is statutorily appointed under Section 4.1 of the Act. Among the anticipated benefits of reforming the governance structure of the liquor licensing authority is the enhanced representation from different professional backgrounds and sectors of the economy. The bill provides that the minister responsible for liquor licensing, not the governor, will appoint members to the new single licensing authority. The new liquor licensing authority will include members from the following sectors: legal, security, drug treatment and social work, hospitality, and retail. Madam President, in his letter, the governor stated that he did not see any difficulty in the proposal to remove the 3 licensing districts provided in the Act, or to include in the liquor licensing authority persons with knowledge in hospitality and retail. Madam President, comparable jurisdictions such as Cayman Islands, Turks and Caicos Islands, and the British Virgin Islands have all modernized their liquor licensing regimes. They more adequately reflect the multifaceted considerations that inform the decision to renew or grant a liquor license. I should put it the other way around, to grant or renew a liquor license. In many cases, the liquor licensing agency is fully independent of the judiciary, thereby maintaining an arm's-length relationship for the courts to hear appeals where applications for licenses are unsuccessful. Madam President, the Bermuda Police Service presently has various powers of enforcement under Part 5 of the Act, and an officer has been assigned to enter and inspect licensed premises. These policing powers include the power to search a licensed premise and will remain in force. However, the Bermuda Police Service has conceded that there is a need for additional persons, officers, to carry out the prescribed activities. Consequently, amendments to Part 5 of the Act will allow ministerial discretion to appoint persons, as may be required, as inspectors to ensure compliance with the Act. The proposed expansion of the classes of license will increase the need for the minister to have this discretion. These measures will enable the reconstituted single licensing authority, in collaboration with law enforcement, to better ensure compliance with the Act and any terms and conditions of a license or permit. Madam President, to decrease the chances of diminishing standards over time under the new law, provision is made under Clause 3 for ministerial guidance to be published from time to time. This will have the added advantage of informing the public of their obligations under the Act, including how one is eligible to and able to apply for a license. It is anticipated that this will also have the added effect of encouraging compliance with licensing requirements. It should be pointed out, Madam President, that the process for obtaining a liquor license or permit is quite involved and seemingly onerous on an applicant. There are presently over 12 procedural steps in an application that must be adhered to before the license application is considered. This is further justification to streamline the administration as proposed by the bill. Enhanced provisions for guidance are advantageous to expedite these steps and to decrease the chances of any errors which prolong the application process. Madam President, the streamlining of the application process will eventually include online applications to assist applicants in a less onerous process. The sittings of the Liquor Licensing Authority will still be required, but allowing online applications will assist with not only the modernization of the application process, but also with the timely scheduling of the annual and special sittings of the Liquor Licensing Authority. Madam President, this takes us to the final issue of updating the 23 fees and 30 fines under the Act. The most recent increase to the license fees was in 2016 in amendments to the Act. It introduced the tourism event license. The PLP, as opposition at that time, reviewed the bill and particularly the increase in fines and suggested to the former Attorney General that no additional expenses be placed on members' clubs, which include sports and community clubs, by way of an increased fee. During the second reading of the bill, the former Attorney General stated, as reflected in Hansard, in terms of the licenses, we have agreed to keep members' clubs licenses at the same level of $325. Madam President, we were mindful that members' clubs may still be in a similar financial position, and with their benefit to the community, while there was an increase in the other license fees, this fee remains the same. Madam President, it has been almost 45 years since the Liquor License Act came into operation, and the amendments to the fines are the most comprehensive to date. The increase is intended to be a deterrent for contravention of the provisions of the Act or any terms and conditions of a permit or license. Accordingly, the fees and fines were examined to ensure that they were up to date. It should be noted that the fee for a Class A license went from $2,000 to $3,000. It may appear to be a significant increase. However, Madam President, it reflects an increase of $83 per month. With respect to the fines, consideration was given to ensure that they provide sufficient deterrence. Before closing, I would like to take this opportunity, Madam President, to thank the men and women who have served the liquor licensing authorities over the years and who continue to serve. Special thanks is extended to the Senior Magistrate and Chair, the Worshipful Juan P. Wolf, not only for his suggested changes to the bill, but also for his contributions made to the authorities over the many years. And with that, I conclude, and thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Madam AG. And before I open the floor, I would just like to acknowledge in the Senate the Permanent Secretary of Legal Affairs, Ms. Marva Bryan, as well as the Parliamentary Council. Welcome to you all. Would any senator care to speak on this bill? Senator Kemp, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Madam AG, for the summary. I would appreciate, I guess, just for my own clarity, if you could walk me through the enforcement policy. I understand that there's a summary conviction for the fine, but what if the event, I'm especially looking at the ad hoc events, and what are the next steps if the event does not cease? How would the non-police inspectors appointed by the Liquor License Authority manage events that continue or operating without a license? I'm assuming that they don't have any powers of arrest and this kind of thing. I'd also like to know, I recognize that certainly with putting in fines that are relatively on par with the license fee, that simplifying the application process was necessary, so I commend those 12 steps being reduced down. But I'm looking particularly at kind of, I guess, the payoff for a one-time event operator between having to go through whatever the simplified application process is versus the fine of $500 and the one-time fee of $200, with there not being a lot of margin. If you could, I wasn't sure if that simplified process only applied to the kind of standard Class A, B, et cetera licenses, or if it was also much simplified for the one-offs compared to the existing process, and when the online application process is expected to be available. Thank you.
Senators, I would just like to acknowledge another person in the Senate who is the policy analyst, Mr. Livingston Wedderburn. Welcome to you, sir. Would any other senator care to speak? Senator Kemp, Senator Jardine, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, certainly I applaud anything that sort of streamlines processes and combining the three into one liquor licensing authority makes a lot of sense in our small island. It is, I gather that all these different licenses are obviously there for a purpose. It should be rather interesting for whoever is trying to monitor all this, because we have catering permits, we have itinerant restaurant licenses which are defined, and we have special event licenses. And then in Section 22C, subsection 3, we have the following, which says, the licensing authority may grant a special event license for an event of an infrequent or temporary nature that is not within Sections 22C1. So there's a very broad spectrum of granting privileges which are given for a variety of events. And I understand there's obviously criteria that everybody has to meet in order to obtain a special event license. But it seems like, again, one would have to have a pretty good understanding of how these licenses are granted. And so I think having one authority to monitor all this makes a lot of sense, because they will have to get up to speed fairly quickly, I'm sure, with the number of licenses or applications that will be made. I did have a comment about the fines perhaps being a bit low, that I think perhaps one can monitor that over the first year or two that they are in place, and if we find that there are a lot of violations, then perhaps those could be increased in order to discourage any improper use or non-obtaining of licenses and so on. In terms of the increase in fees, I don't recall the period of time that Madam AG said, but it was certainly, I think, 45 years or some extended period of time since these fees have been raised. And so I think that raising them from $2,000 to $3,000, it's a pretty significant jump. There's no question about that. But when you think back over the period of time where there has been no increase, I suppose it's reasonable to assume that. So I support this bill. I think the government is obviously trying to modernize, as we've heard earlier, some legislation which has been in place for a long period of time. And so I would support this bill, Madam President. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Jardine. Would any other senator care to speak on this bill? No, then Madam AG, a few questions. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. With regard to the enforcement provisions, there is no intention for any other inspector to have the powers of the police. What's necessary is for the police to be informed, and so the oversight with the ministerial appointments in terms of inspectors is simply to gather the information necessary for enforcement. So there's no intention to extend those powers. With regard to the simplification of the process, all licenses will be subject to the same simplification process or simplified process. With regard to the online application process, that's being worked on, and what we're going to do is probably allow this session to continue as is while we make the amendments that are necessary. The process is quite extensive, as I said earlier, and the senior magistrate has basically undertaken to streamline the administrative part of it during the upcoming session. So not every applicant will be required to go before the committee, and that's because some of them are just renewing. And so when we have new applicants, it's imperative for us to ensure that they have in place what's necessary, Madam President, to ensure that they are in compliance. With regard to the various categories of licenses, and it does seem quite intricate when you look at the Act. What's important to note is that there are different levels of compliance necessary for the different classes, because a major event requires, for instance, more security and more oversight. And so what we're trying to do, I mean, there was a thought to actually streamline it so we had one license, but the different activities surrounding the sale of alcohol, there's just so many issues. And what we try to do is balance the economic interests of members of the public who choose to engage in this as a business enterprise with the prevention aspect, and therein lies the challenge. And so during the process of formulating the bill, what we had when I came into office was various vendors who sent in their concerns, particularly with respect to wine tasting and other such activities which weren't properly regulated. And in order to maintain that balance of the economic advancement of businesses as well as the prevention and deterrent piece, we had to actually make specific provision for the categories of licenses and permits which were out there and not properly regulated. So there you see the itinerant license and the like that we have. With regard to persons understanding the rules, it's imperative that we had the guidance provision. And so as we go along the road to further modernization, I will be issuing guidance to ensure that everyone understands what this process involves and what the expectations are with regard to compliance. So what we have today is the first step towards modernization, and I'm extremely keen to refine the process, because that's where I think we're having most of the challenges in terms of persons who want to engage. But I will say that's incumbent upon applicants to make sure that they actually follow the processes that are in place, because we've had in the past many complaints coming from industry, but when we delve down into the actual problems, you're finding that people are actually breaking the rules. So the applicants are applying late, they're not necessarily in compliance. So what we're going to do, as we do with any new policy, is exercise some oversight and monitoring to see where we may have to further refine, issue guidance, and aid the process.
Thank you, Madam AG. Now, if you, your second reading.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that the bill be now read a second time.
Is there any objection to that motion? No objection. Carry on.
Am I suspending Standing Order 26 with respect? Madam President, I move that Standing Order 26 be suspended with respect to the bill.
Is there any objection to that motion? No objection.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that the bill entitled the Liquor License Amendment Act now be read a third time.
Is there any objection to the third reading? No objection.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that the bill do now pass.
It has been moved that the bill entitled the Liquor License Amendment Act 2019 do now pass. Is there any objection to that motion? No objection. The bill is passed. Thank you, Madam AG and Senators. We'll now move on to the second reading of the Customs Tariff Amendment Act 2019. And before we actually do, I'd just like to acknowledge in the gallery the presence of the Permanent Secretary of Health, Mrs. Jennifer Attright Sterling, and also the Parliamentary Counsel, Dr. Anthony Richardson. Welcome to you. This is Senator Richardson. Is your bill? Or you have the floor.
Good morning, Madam President.
Good morning.
Fellow Senators and members of the listening public. Madam President, I move that the bill entitled the Customs Tariff Amendment Bill 2019 be now read a second time.
Is there an objection to that motion? No objection. Carry on, Senator Richardson.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I am pleased to invite honorable senators to give consideration to the bill entitled Customs Tariff Amendment Act 2019. Madam President, the bill proposes to amend the Customs Tariff Act 1970, the Principal Act, with measures that include 1. Increase the duty rate to 75% for food and beverage items affected by the sugar tax on April 1st, 2019, and 2. To apply the above-mentioned duty rate to chocolate and cocoa preparations containing added sugar. These measures affect the first schedule to the Principal Act. I am pleased to be speaking on behalf of the Minister responsible for the policy initiative pertaining to this amendment. Madam President, in June 2018, the government introduced, as promised in the throne speech and budget statement, an increase in the duty rate on sugar-sweetened beverages, candies, and pure sugar. These proposals were outlined in detail in the Ministry of Health's sugar tax consultation document and subsequent reports. Madam President, in June 2018, the Minister advised the public that Bermuda's new sugar tax would be phased in gradually. On 1st October, a 50% duty rate was implemented on the said items as part of a transitioning phase. Today, it is proposed to raise the duty rate on the said items to 75% from April 1st, 2019. In addition to the full 75% duty rate implementation, chocolate is proposed to be included in the tariff as of 1st April 2019, also at the 75% sugar tax rate. Madam President, Bermuda's food system is an interconnected network of providers, servers, and consumers. Accordingly, policy changes in one area can affect all parts of the network. Government is determined to take progressive steps to influence a cultural shift towards healthier food choices in Bermuda in order to tackle our obesity and chronic disease epidemics. Unhealthy weight is a leading risk factor for chronic diseases such as heart disease, diabetes, kidney disease, and cancer, as well as health problems like hypertension and stroke. It is estimated that diabetes and kidney disease currently account for 10% of the country's total health spending. Madam President, this means just 2 lifestyle-induced preventable conditions are costing us, Bermuda, $78 million. This has to stop. The sugar tax is an important part of the measures needed to change choices and behavior. Madam President, 3 out of 4 adults in Bermuda are overweight or obese, and government wants to emphasize HEAL, healthy, eating, and active living. The elements of heal go hand in hand, but it's almost impossible to exercise yourself out of an unhealthy diet. The World Health Organization recommends that free sugars should be limited to less than 5% of the daily energy intake or less than 25 grams of sugar per day. Madam President, this means that a single soda, I underscore single soda, already exceeds the World Health Organization recommended daily intake. And since 50% of adults in Bermuda drink at least one sugary drink a day, I'm starting to smile, we can begin to appreciate how it may contribute to 75% of our population being overweight or obese. As an aside, Madam President, when we talk about obese, we think of it as being like just complete negative thing, but I didn't realize until recently that it's not like this gross overweight. It's amazing the degree to which people can be deemed to be obese from from a medical perspective, which is more than I would have thought. But Madam President, in one Hamilton grocery store, the grocer has affixed blue labels under sugar tax items that state this item has been affected by the sugar tax. I'm going to come back to that later on, by the way. In one aisle alone, the minister counted 28 labels and wants to thank the grocer for putting out these labels since it increases awareness. The advice? If your shopping cart and daily diet includes one or more of these items, it is likely that you need to rethink your drink or change your diet. It is sobering to recognize how many sweetened, calorie-dense food and drink items have flooded our grocery stores and diets. Items that were previously consumed in moderation, i.e. candies, or as treats, have become regular fare. Bermuda, we are immersed in an obesogenic environment, and it's going to take awareness, vigilance, and hard work to change that for the better. Madam President, the World Health Organization proposes the use of taxes, TAXES, as part of a broad strategy to prevent obesity and non-communicable diseases, including type 2 diabetes, to improve health outcomes and direct persons towards healthy options. For instance, the World Health Organization has recommended that sugar-sweetened beverage taxes should be designed to increase retail prices by 20% to meaningfully impact health. Indeed, a number of other jurisdictions have introduced measures in recent years, and studies before and since the introduction of sugar taxes have shown that they help to reduce consumption of these products. And I'm sure there'll be some comments in a minute in terms of whether this really works, but in any event. A recent study published on 30th January 2019 showed that the Barbados sugar-sweetened beverage tax of 10%, introduced in June 2015, increased the retail price by 5.9% and decreased sales by 4.3%. And I want to emphasize that, or repeat it, in that the beverage tax of 10% caused the actual retail prices to increase by 5.9%, i.e. less, and decreased sales by 4.3%. At the same time, sales of non-sugar sweetened beverages increased by 5.2%, with bottled water sales going up by 7.5%, which is encouraging from a health perspective. A lot of times when it comes to numbers, it's like just numbers. But in reality, this is saying that by increasing the price of these goods, there was less consumption and more healthy alternatives were used instead. While sugary drinks have been the focus of the sugar taxes in most other jurisdictions, the tax proposed for Bermuda includes items such as candies, which now includes chocolate, and plain sugar. The goal is to curb unwanted consumption of these foods, which contribute no nutritional value to our daily diet. As a reminder, the Department of Health's full consultation report on the sugar tax is published on their website. I actually have a copy of it here. Madam President, there were 351 responses to the consultation. The findings of the consultation supported the implementation of the sugar tax, with most respondents indicating that the tax would change consumers' behavior. Again, I smile because you wonder who the respondents would have been. But anyway, a clear majority of 60% said candy should be taxed, and many questioned why chocolate was not included. That is why we're now including chocolate. There was broader support from the consultation for the tax to be introduced at 75% duty. So those who responded wanted a significant tax on these chocolates and candies and what have you, on the suggested items, and that is why we are now proposing to implement the full 75% duty rate. Sugar and sweetened items have become more expensive at retail stores locally, and the increase has prompted greater awareness and adoption of healthier buying habits. There continues to be much support for the sugar tax, and the minister has received letters of thanks from persons who have been motivated to drastically reduce their daily sugar intake and introduce high fiber and lean protein with every meal. Some amazing results, including diabetes reversal, are possible and are being achieved. Madam President, I will pause here to make the statement that there has been some concern in response to the sugar tax that some retailers are actually increasing prices unnecessarily. The most alarming, and I say that it's anecdotal because I just cannot believe this, but anyway, that in one instance the price of eggs has increased, supposedly, in response to the sugar tax, which clearly makes no sense. And so in my role as the chair of the Price Control Commission, I've been asked to monitor any unnecessary increases in prices, which may relate to actual price gouging. And for senators and members of the public, the idea is that let's assume it is a chocolate bar that is bought overseas at $1. When you import it, of course, there's going to be the prices for shipping and duty and the rest of it. The customs duty is not on that. It's on the original purchase price. And so it is going to be inappropriate for, if the retail price of a chocolate bar, big chocolate, let's say, is $2, it's going to be inappropriate if the retail price increases by 75% as a result of this sugar tax. And that's what we're going to be looking into. And also to make sure that the items that do not contain sugar are not used as an excuse for these increases. And I'm saying that because as part of the Price Control Commission, the challenge was how do you monitor things, and we cannot put in place price controls per se, but there is the responsibility to ensure that there is not any unnecessary price gouging from this process. And so I'm letting everybody be aware that we're going to look at this in a proactive way to ensure that there isn't the inadvertent increases in prices. Madam President, the three most important decisions that we will make for our health every day are breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. How many ate breakfast today? The government has eliminated duty on potatoes, cauliflower, broccoli, turnips, carrots, oranges, and apples. I didn't see grapes. And apples. To further support healthier nutritional choices, showing this government is absolutely committed to improve our diets. And so the comment that healthy items are too expensive for us to consume, the government response has been to eliminate duty. And again, the commentary has been, when government puts in place these regimes, do the importers reflect the reductions in their prices? And so, realistically, unless something's changed with the base price, the prices for potatoes, cauliflower, broccoli, turnips, carrots, and oranges and apples, for example, should reduce if the duty on those items have now been reduced. As the government indicated in a previous budget statement, the additional revenue collected from the sugar tax is to support the promotion of healthy living initiatives. Since the October 2018 implementation, the value of imported goods fell by 24%, representing a decrease of $1.2 million. While it is still early days and we will continue to monitor, it may well indicate that importation of these items fell during the first 5 months of implementation. If this reflects reduced consumption of sugary items, then it is good news, but we have to monitor for a longer period together with behavioral surveys of consumption to see the impact conclusively. I know I'm taking a while this morning, Madam President, but I will also say that over the longer period, we have to see whether or not the importers stockpiled before the tax came into play, because that would have the same impact in terms of there would appear to be a reduction, so we have to monitor that for an extended period, as the brief says. So nevertheless, despite the reduced imports, there was a net gain in duty of $695,000 for the affected items. That is a 66% increase in duty despite reduced imports. So it may be having the intended impact. I emphasize that it's early days, but so far the figures are promising. The additional funds generated by the sugar tax will be allocated to support healthy living initiatives as they are developed. And that's another question. Well, Anthony, with the sugar tax in place, where has the money gone? Pardon the grammar, but that's what they've asked. And the answer is, to date, the additional revenue, has helped to offset a $200,000 reduction in revenue from duty losses arising from the reduction of duty on healthy items of 0% duty. So there is no more duty coming in from the other things I talked about just now, and some of the sugar tax is going to offset that so the government doesn't have a net negative revenue. Also, nutrition labeling on menus and vertical farming have been identified as initiatives that will be supported. And so the rally cry is, if you are interested in vertical farming, let it be known and let's get that going. This continues to be a work in progress as potential initiatives develop further. Madam President, I welcome and encourage entrepreneurs to tap into the public's increasing demand for healthy alternatives with reduced or no sugar. A market exists for this, and more products can be seen on many retailer shelves, reflecting the changing mood and tastes of the population. The consultation process also noted that local businesses were concerned that taxing sugar would make it more expensive for them to do business, as their goods will be more expensive than imported goods. Local preparers of foodstuffs have been given the opportunity to apply for concessionary rates from the Minister of Finance under the existing provisions for commercial manufacturers of goods. And I asked about that because I know sometimes for small bakeries in particular, it's a very cumbersome process, and we've been informed that at least 2 businesses, well-known businesses, have applied and were approved by the Minister of Finance to be included in a customs tariff approved organizations notice 2019, which is Crowley & Bakery and Dunkley and Pioneer Dairies Limited. And I say that because persons have actually asked about that, and my response is to do what they need to do to register so they can at least reduce their costs and carry on, whatever they're doing, especially because we know that there are so many either small or home-based bakeries that, in my opinion, have excellent goods, and you wouldn't want those prices to increase unnecessarily. So, Madam President, the Department will monitor consumption levels through health surveys and imports. The first price survey was completed in the summer of 2018 and will be repeated this summer. The STEP survey will be repeated in 2019 and will monitor overweight and obesity to evaluate whether our interventions are making the difference we need. Before I conclude, Madam President, I want to give recognition to the staff at BLDC, because yesterday this was a huge point of discussion, some of these points I'm making today, and they helped to bring some clarity. And I had to try to reassure them that, yes, healthy alternatives are available, and to specify that government has, in fact, reduced the duty on what are deemed to be healthier alternatives. So, Madam President, the government remains committed to reducing chronic diseases and lifestyle-related health problems in Bermuda. We encourage all residents to make a personal commitment to do the same. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Richardson. Would any senator care to speak on this bill? Senator Jardine, you have the floor.
Everybody's shrugging, so I guess I'll jump in. As a chocoholic, obviously a 75% tax on chocolates that I previously enjoy is going to have a significant impact, there's no question, in addition to my wife, who watches very carefully what I eat. So from my point of view, the sugar tax, I think, is something that is very worthwhile. And I know we had a debate back in June, I believe, when we passed the First Amendment bill about sugar tax and the effects that it's having in various countries around the world. And just very briefly, Madam President, I wanted to recall some of the facts, and I had a quick look on the internet for any updates, but certainly in France, when they introduced the sugar tax on soft drinks there, it had a significant impact in terms of the amount of consumption of soft drinks. Belgium, not so much of an effect, but it did have, and the United Kingdom, it's had an effect. What's interesting to note is that the United Kingdom is now pushing forward, as I understand it, with a sugar tax on chocolate, which, if you can imagine, in the United Kingdom is a significant step for them. Chocolate is a major part, unfortunately, I guess, of children's diets over there, has become so. So the United Kingdom is moving forward in it, and I guess one could say, well, maybe Bermuda is taking the lead on this, which is a good thing. Mm-hmm. So, from my point of view, I understand that obviously a 75% increase in the duty on chocolate is going to, I think, have a significant impact on the consumption of chocolate. It will impact businesses that use sugar, and we've heard from the Senator the consideration that's going to be given to small family businesses who produce home-baked goods and other businesses with respect to that 75% tax. I was pleased to obviously hear about the reduction to 0% on duty on healthy foods, because that is a major issue. If you shop regularly in the food stores, and my wife doesn't let me shop because I always buy things that aren't on the list, but if you look at the price of healthy foods in most food stores, they are very, very high. And so those with a limited budget are reduced to buying things that aren't quite so healthy, simply because they can't afford the more healthy foods. And so that is good news to hear the duty on things like cauliflower and other vegetables is coming down. And I would encourage government to continue to look at other areas of foodstuffs in the grocery stores to see what other foods, more healthy foods, they can reduce the duty on. I was also pleased to hear the Senator talk about controls or reviewing price gouging, because that is a real concern, where prices of certain goods may go up prior to the implementation of some of these additional duties, and we want to make sure that the benefits that are supposedly being passed on to the consumers are indeed being passed on. So I was pleased to hear that the Price Control Commission is going to be looking at that to hopefully prevent any price gouging that might take place. So, Madam President, I think on balance, I was certainly in favor of the changes that are being recommended here to the customs tariff with respect to breakfast cereals that have a lot of sugar in them, other baked goods that have a lot of sugar, and I can see my consumption of chocolate bars disappearing into the past. And so with those few words, Madam President, I support this legislation.
Thank you, Senator Jardine. Would any other senator care to speak? Senator Robinson, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Regarding the sugar tax, I believe most of us, if not all of us, agree with the fact that we need a healthier population and that, there needs to be more emphasis put on sugary items. My only concern regarding the sugar tax was that it didn't come with an accompanied breakdown of exactly where the percentages were going to go and a national plan to combat sugar usage and overeating and things that do cause diabetes. So I do support the endeavor to create a healthier population, but I do think that taxes like these should be paired with a national plan that should have been presented to the people of Bermuda so that they could know exactly where the taxes breakdowns were going and what initiatives were down the pipeline, so that it showed that it was pre-planning and that it was a dedicated tax initiative that was meant to better the people of Bermuda. So that would be my only concern. I look forward to seeing a national plan to combat diabetes and the support of initiatives that are already combating diabetes. And I also look forward to seeing a precise breakdown of how those initiatives will be funded and how the sugar tax percentages will be divvied up. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Robinson. Would any other senator care to speak? Senator Kemp, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator Richardson, for the introductory statement. I have a few questions about the logistics of the bill as well as the carve-outs. I note that the general intent of the bill is to curb behavior through by affecting price through importation duties, and we're all aware of the prevalence of diabetes in Bermuda. And my question, one of my first set of questions, comes around behaviors developed in childhood. And I just wanted to understand if there was any research or anything that supported the carve-out for sugary breakfast cereals, which is obviously a main breakfast item for young children. Certainly as you get older, perhaps you start to eat more eggs and this kind of thing. But for young children, the fact that there's 0% custom duty on sugary breakfast cereals feels a bit like a missed opportunity to affect behaviors there. I also wanted to ask about the, if we look at, I guess, section, where are we in the bill? Section 2.3, where it refers to customs tariff heading 22.02, and it tackles beverages that have added sugar, but it does not affect the fruit or vegetable juices under heading 20.09. And I note that under heading 20.09 of the customs tariff, that there's only a 5% duty on fruit and vegetable juices, whether or not they contain added sugars. So, again, it feels like whilst people might be turned away from water with even a small amount of sugar in it, there's going to be no matching price change on fruit juices that could have an extraordinary amount of sugar in it, as the customs duty on head 20.09 is only 5%. I also worry about what, again, without the accompanying communication plan or whatever, that when you look at, if you squeeze juice, for example, orange, from a fresh orange at home, you get approximately 2 ounces of juice out of it. However, your standard to-go size fruit juice contains about 10 ounces of juice and can have 23 grams of sugar, even though there's no added sugar in it. Compare that to a Coke that has about 39 grams of sugar. So it feels like there's a bit of a missed gap there, and I just wanted to get some clarity around that from the senator. And I'm also looking at the way in which the duty is levied. In the case of any solid imported food stuff, i.e. not liquid, it seems to be, and I'd accept clarification here if I'm misreading this, it seems to be per kilo of food as opposed to per kilo of sugar, which would mean, if I'm interpreting this correctly, that, for example, a Kind nut bar that has 5 grams of sugar in it will see the same price increase as a Kind nut bar that has 9.2 grams of sugar in it. So it would seem that it's not assisting people to direct their choices towards the healthier of two options in this case. It's simply going to drive up the price of any foodstuff that has any added sugar in it. I also wanted to talk about the logistics of shipping and the exemptions as relates to small businesses. It's all good and well that the largest importers can apply for the tariff exemption when they do their own baking, but for most of the small businesses that engage in baking in Bermuda, they buy their sugar from the wholesaler, and by the time they go and purchase it, the sugar's already been imported and already has had a customs declaration filed. So it becomes very onerous and expensive to then go back and file further declarations to get the lower duty rate on the smaller quantities of sugar purchased by home bakers, which again kind of makes it harder as a local producer to get these benefits that have been kind of put in after the fact. So I just want to kind of highlight that I'm worried about the actual impact for the small producers, because it's going to be, unless they import their own sugar directly from overseas and file their own customs duty declaration, it's going to be very, very challenging for them to actually benefit from these carve-outs.
Thank you, Senator Kemp. Before I pass on to the next senator who wants to speak, I would just like to acknowledge in the Senate the Junior Minister of Finance, Honorable Wayne Burbert, as well as the Financial Secretary, Mr. Anthony Manders. Welcome to you both. I think Senator Michelle Simmons, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I just have a brief comment and a question. And I'll first say that I applaud the government for moving forward with this next stage of the sugar tax. Yes, it will hurt because some of us will become more conscious of the fact that we have to pay a lot more to indulge in things that we probably know we shouldn't be indulging in anyway. But so be it. I'd also like to encourage the government to go even further with one aspect of what they're doing, and that is with regard to further customs duty relief for fresh fruits and vegetables. The reason I'm asking them to go even further and provide more relief of fresh fruits and vegetables is tied to a word that was used earlier, and that is obesogenic. I went straight away to the internet and I found a paper here. It's written by the University of Nevada Cooperative Extension, and it says at the top, what is an obesogenic environment? And I'd just like to quote a small section of this. May I, Madam President?
You certainly may, Senator Simmons.
It says, the term obesogenic environment refers to an environment that promotes gaining weight, and one that is not conducive to weight loss within the home or workplace. In other words, the obesogenic environment refers to an environment that helps or contributes to obesity. Focusing on modifying the obesogenic environment at the community and policy level can impact the community residents at large. These changes could include access to healthy food and access to places to be physically active. And that's the end of the quote. So one of the things we have to continue to strive for is making sure that as many people as possible have access to healthy food. And that access can only be provided if the prices of some of the healthy foods are lower. I agree with us trying to impact on thinking and habits by taking away, in a sense, access to the sugary foods. But unless that is supported with us providing better access to healthy foods, then it may not have as great an impact on thinking in the community as we would like. So my plea, once again, to government is please consider going even further in reducing customs duties on more healthy vegetables and fruit. And with that, Madam President, I will end my remarks.
Thank you, Senator Simmons. Would any other senator care to speak on this bill? Senator Campbell, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, a lot of the discussion around expense has been focused on individuals purchasing and the increased costs that they will face. But when you draw back, Madam President, and you look from a macro level, a higher level, some people say fly at 35,000 feet, the greatest expense, or one of the greatest expenses facing individuals in this country today is the cost of health. And these products containing sugar, we've heard, contribute to obesity and other illnesses that are driving the cost of health through the roof. So we can focus on the impact on Vance Campbell when he buys his chocolate, and I do like chocolate, And I'm also one of those people, I was shocked to find is obese. I never considered myself to be obese. But according to the charts, I am. Yes, I could afford to lose some weight, but I never considered myself obese. But I want us to draw back and stop focusing on our individual purchase and look at the cost to the country through health insurance that these products are causing. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Campbell. Would any other senator care to speak? No, I would just like to make a couple of comments myself as a health professional in the past, and certainly am fully aware of the obesity that is in this island. I think most of us can remember way back when you looked at people in the community and they weren't obese, they weren't fat, young people. But now what we see is a tremendous increase in the obesity levels in Bermuda. And of course, as a health professional, I can say that I have been exceedingly concerned, as Senator Campbell has duly noted, the cost of health care in Bermuda. If you compare us with the other OECD countries, Bermuda, next to the United States, has the highest health care cost. And so I think that anything that is put in place by the government to draw attention to what we as individuals and as a population can do to lower the cost of health care, it is certainly our diet and the sugary drinks. And even when you look at children, I'm glad to see in schools that they have programs where children are involved in activities and recreation. And it just warms my heart to see all the activity, because the obesity is not just in the adults, but you have to start in the schools. You have to start with the diet, and you have to start with education in the schools. So I fully support and commend the government for bringing this bill forward. Senator Richardson, I believe it's over to you, and you have a few questions to respond to.
Sure. Again, Madam President, I obviously take the serious nature of what we're proposing to do, and I will start, I guess, by underscoring the comment from Senator Campbell in terms of this bill is really not an individual bill. It's a country-specific bill. It's for the island to try to certainly reduce our levels of unhealthiness. And in my mind right now, to be honest, there's a picture of persons who have amputations. Mm-hmm. And, yes, there may be some other elements that are attributed to their circumstance, but clearly we don't want to get to a stage whereby we see an increased incidence of amputations that are already quite high. Mm-hmm. And so we want to be very, very mindful of that. To add to that, and I take your point, Madam President, in terms of the children at schools do engage in physical activity. Mm-hmm. What I'm still surprised at, though, is in the middle school and also the senior school, they do less gym or PT, whatever you refer to, that physical activity thing, to the extent where, quote unquote, back in the day, we had gym like every week, all year round. Mm-hmm. Whereas now, I'm like, guess what? The comment sometimes is, we don't have gym for an entire term. We deselect gym this term, have it next term, and I'm like, this is quite surprising to me. And we all complain, I guess, around the table. I did smile when Senator Simmons said that she immediately went to the internet to look at what obesogenic environment was. Mm-hmm. And I smiled only because that's an amazing aspect. But for our young people, right, they use the electronic devices to an access whereby on a Saturday, for example, we talked about it recently, we may be outside running around doing whatever, where they would spend the entire day in front of a TV monitor, doing whatever they're doing. And so part of it, I believe, is going to be a shift from parents' point of view, mm-hmm. to stop using the electronic devices as a convenience for babysitting effectively. Mm-hmm. Like, find a way to get outside, get children outside, get them engaged. And yes, there are some other attendant costs about paying for this, that, and the other, but we have to, I think, do more to ensure that Bermuda as an environment as a country rather, does do more activities. And to add to that also, members may not be aware that government does have an initiative to place more outdoor exercise equipment throughout the island. I'm not sure the extent they're going to do it. Is all the parks? So in the parks, again, my bias being from St. George's, I know that they have started to do so in the east, whereby, there's free equipment, and I guess we can engage ourselves in going back out, just doing some of those fun things, and some of those things are actually free. I know my personal preference sometimes is to ride a paddle bike, which is not as easy as people think sometimes. When you do it, it's nice. You can go do things, it's relatively free and not too much stressful on your body. Now, I'll try, Madam President, now to go through some of the direct questions. Starting with Senator Jardine. I think there's a general lament with you in terms of going to be less chocolates available. However, sorry, Madam Chair. The good news, though, is that there are apparently sugar-free chocolates. And to the extent that there are sugar-free chocolates, Madam President, I'm being told that nobody wants a sugar-free chocolate. However, Senator Jardine, that will be the option. If you want to keep on consuming without the increased cost. There was also the question of the impact on cost to small businesses. And if I may, Madam President, I want to read a short portion. There's a formal response to that. And it is that approved bakeries or pre-approved manufacturers, bakeries, and itinerant restaurants will be able to obtain a 5% concessionary rate on sugar in one of two ways. If they are importing sugar themselves, they can complete a customs declaration form and take a copy of their license from the Department of Health with the declaration, and that will enable them to get the 5%. Or if they are purchasing sugar from another approved business, from a wholesaler, the buyer must provide the seller with a copy of their license from the Department of Health. And so I will go to one of the importers, for example, to buy some sugar. If I have a license, I will show them that, and I'll get the 5%, and then they in turn have to then go to customs to get their refund. So it may be a bit cumbersome, to be honest, but there is a process by which, if I am a small business and I rely on the cost of my sugar, I'll go through that process to make sure that I'm not unnecessarily impacted. And so again, to the general public, the sugar tax is 75%, but for an approved business, let's call it, they can get a 5% instead, which I think is quite reasonable.
Senator Kemp?
Yes.
What is your
Yes, thank you. I just want to understand on when a restaurant or a bakery or whatever goes to a wholesaler or a supermarket with this kind of proof that they're eligible for a lower customs rate, must the supermarket and wholesaler give them a discount, or is this something that's agreed between the two parties?
Madam President? I'm looking.
Well, you...
Is that the importation? Yeah.
Sorry?
Would you like to take a moment to remind? Senator Richardson is obtaining a response to your question. Senator Kemp. To get it through and import it. Yeah. So they have some custom. While we're waiting, I would just like to acknowledge the fact that we do have representatives from the Customs Department, and Senator Richardson is obtaining information from them. Yes, are they his? Yes, and I would also like to welcome the young people in the gallery. There are some youngsters, actually, who are here observing. Senator Richardson, you have a response?
Yes, Madam President.
Senator Kemp?
Yes.
You have the floor.
The response is that there isn't the importer must give the reduction. As a process, though, as a small business, I'm gonna need to prove to the importer that I do have the exemption. And that's why I was saying that to the general public, if